Hello and welcome to the In Publishing podcast. This week, our guest is Duncan Tickell, Chief Revenue Officer at Immediate Media, publisher of some of Britain's best-known consumer magazine brands. I talked to Duncan about his return to Immediate, the company he helped to build, after 18 months running his own media consultancy, about the importance of diversification in media businesses, and how the pandemic has inspired innovation.
What we've seen over the last period and what's been incredibly interesting has been how much of a catalyst for innovation the pandemic has been, freed and unencumbered by the normal constraints that you would have. Everyone's realised we've got to double down and try some new stuff because we're in exceptional times. And actually, we've really seen some exciting growth from those direct-to-consumer revenues. We're very fortunate in the fact that we have brands that have played out well in the pandemic. So think gardening, think cooking, think entertainment.
Duncan revealed what makes a good commercial strategy for a successful multi-channel media business, including building the right culture.
And that was an incredibly important part of the plan, was to actually create an environment where people wanted to come into work, bring their best every day, and actually just enjoy being there as well as doing great work.
The importance of direct-to-consumer revenues.
But increasingly now we're looking at direct-to-consumer revenues and how we build out a whole number of different direct-to-consumer revenue streams.
The value of having engaged consumers.
My career journey has really taught me the value of having engaged consumers and how important it is.
And how webinars on making sourdough might just be the future of publishing.
Webinars is one that I would call out. We were incredibly surprised at the strong uptake that we've had on brands such as Gardener's World on some how-to webinars, or how to cook sourdough on BBC Good Food.
We would like to thank our podcast sponsor, Acorn Web Offset, the Yorkshire-based specialist A5 and A4 magazine printer. With high-speed web offset and sheet-fed printing, together with in-house saddle stitching, perfect binding and mailing services, Acorn can cope with the most demanding of production turnarounds. Acorn prides itself on its efficiency and low-cost print production. For more information, visit acornweb.co.uk. Duncan Tickell was recently appointed to the newly created role of Chief Revenue Officer at Immediate Media, publisher of some of the UK's best-known specialist consumer magazines, ranging from the Radio Times to BBC Gardener's World. In his new role, he will lead Immediate's commercial teams, as well as Imagine, Immediate's creative and content studio. Duncan, welcome to the In Publishing podcast.
Good morning, Ciar.
Can we begin by talking about your journey in publishing to where you are now?
Of course. So I started, like many, without a defined career path. I left university in the early 90s, in the middle of that very deep recession, and like many others, sort of answered an ad in the back of the Guardian to do media sales, which I promptly did for Central for 18 months. And I thought that was it for me and media, because I hadn't had the best 18 months. But actually, I moved to Dennis, which was my first major move, where I was there for a number of years, eventually rising up to the board. So I started out in sales, moved into publishing, and ended up launching an early video games portal. And actually, that part of my journey was very important, because it proved to me that culture was such an important part of working. It's not just about what you do; it's actually the environment that you do it in. And Dennis, in those days, was an incredibly entrepreneurial and exciting place to be. I then moved from Dennis to V&U, where I headed up their consumer portfolio, and in sort of the late 2000s, an opportunity came to join a small private equity-backed digital business called Magicalia. And I seized that because of the entrepreneurial opportunity. And the rest, they say, is history. So we worked in that small business on the basis that if we made a success of it, we might get a bigger opportunity, and that's exactly how it played out. So we were fortunate enough that our owner's exponent acquired BBC magazines with a vision to transform that business. And so between or since formation in 2011, we created Immediate. We then effectively doubled the business, just a little bit more than actually, over the ensuing period. We doubled the number of staff, we doubled the turnover, we doubled the revenue. An amazing journey, only possible through the support of, some owners who recognised the requirement to invest. And we had a very clear plan at Immediate, which was to transform what was a very traditional print media business into a multi-channel one. That, as I say, was very successful. We also proved that we could have a great relationship as a licensee of the BBC, which led to our successful ownership transition to Burda. And again, they've been incredibly supportive owners. So Immediate have now been owned by Burda for a number of years now, about 4 years. I spent the first 2 after Burda acquired, still within the business, and then left to set up my own consultancy, which I did for 18 months, which was a really great sort of additional experience, actually. So it was really good just to get out of an environment you've been in for a long time and be exposed to some new businesses. And I worked with a number of very diverse media businesses, in fact, even some not-for-profits. Really good to be exposed to some different business models. And then I was approached again by Immediate in the middle of the summer to lead on a consultancy basis, a direct-to-consumer offer, which I did for a short period. But it became very, very clear after a period of being back in the business that actually it's a great business. I really enjoyed working there. I understood the business. And that was when I was asked to come and take on this new role of Chief Revenue Officer.
And I think, sorry, I was just going to say, I think you say somewhere on one of your profiles, you don't know what you've got till it's gone.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, it's a fantastic business, and that there were some pillars around what we aim to build when we established Immediate. I've mentioned the diversification of the business. I've mentioned transforming that business, but it was also about building a culture. And that was an incredibly important part of the plan, was to actually create an environment where people wanted to come into work, bring their best every day, and actually just enjoy being there as well as doing great work. And that's why I say when going back and actually spending some time within the business, even in these strange times, it felt very much like a culture and an organisation that I was very much at one with. And so when approached to take on this role, it actually was a surprisingly easy decision.
So this new role of Chief Revenue Officer is a newly created role. Can you tell us more about what it entails and what your main responsibilities are?
Sure. So it's a board or a leadership team level role with responsibility predominantly for the non-circulation revenues. So in that comes advertising, some of the direct consumer off revenues. It also has a strategic responsibility for maximising the monetization and commercialization of our digital properties. So really thinking about and being disciplined about maximising the return we get from that, from those properties, alongside obviously our traditional channels as well.
And so what are the key strands of Immediate's revenue strategy?
Well, I think, clearly, and they're not within my remit, newsstand and subscriptions remain incredibly important. Subscriptions ever more so since the start of the pandemic. So we've seen really strong growth in subscriptions, and that continues to play through now. But actually, increasingly, as the revenue mix now tips towards digital, we are looking at really diversifying our digital businesses and accelerating our digital growth. So, part of that is the traditional ad funded model, but increasingly now we're looking at direct to consumer revenues, and how we build out a whole number of different direct to consumer revenue streams. And that's really starting to gain some traction now, and is the strategic priority for the company, but also um, is substantially sort of diversifying our digital revenue streams and making that part of the business much more resilient.
And can you expand more on what that direct to consumer means?
Sure. I mean, again, there are many strands there. So, but at its very highest level, it's transacting directly with consumers, uh, and to leverage the relationships that you have, and the deep consumer relationships that you have, to unlock transactions directly with consumers or interactions directly with consumers. So, for a very long time, as I mentioned, digital advertising was the key growth engine of our digital business and is still growing at a good pace. Even this year, we've seen healthy growth in digital advertising. But those new streams that are coming on board are things such as we've seen very strong growth in affiliate revenues, i.e., writing bespoke content around purchasing products and facilitating consumer transactions with retailers. We've recently launched a deals business, which is where we present consumers with great offers, and introduce them to the retailers to transact those. It's also now increasingly things like webinars and virtual events. So, I think what we've seen over the last period and what's been incredibly interesting has been how much of a catalyst for innovation the pandemic has been. So, freed and unencumbered by the normal constraints that you would have, um, as a running a digital business, everyone's realised we've got to double down and try some new stuff because we're in exceptional times. And actually, we've really seen some exciting growth from those direct to consumer revenues over that period. We're very fortunate in the fact that we have brands that have played out well in the pandemic. So, um, think gardening, think cooking, um, think entertainment, things that people have been doing at home. And so we've seen incredibly strong growth across our digital properties, both from an audience perspective, but as I say, finding new ways to provide value to those consumers. And so, the webinars is one that I would call out. We were incredibly surprised at the strong uptake that we've had on brands such as Gardener's World on some how-to webinars, or how to cook sourdough on BBC Good Food. So really, really surprising and strong growth in those areas, and it's a real win-win because it means we're increasing our commercial footprint, but all equally we're providing real value to our consumers in return.
And you mentioned how important subscriptions are. I know that's not your side of the business, but is there any friction between those growing subscription bases and your role of increasing commercial revenues?
I'd personally say the absolute opposite, in the sense that I think my career journey has really taught me the value of having engaged consumers and how important it is. So, I think it's not unhelpful in a commercial role now, having been a publisher and having had editorial stewardship as well, to be able to get that balance right. And I think that having that understanding of the importance of the relationship that you have with the consumer, um, actually allows you to be much more sensitive in the way that you try to commercialize those consumers. And when we speak to our commercial partners, by far and away the most valuable segments of our audience are people with the deepest relationships, the people that we have the deepest relationships with, and subscribers are at the absolute peak of that. And so, they're an incredibly valuable audience to commercialize, but equally you have to ensure that their experience of consuming your brand is a good one.
Well, coming on to digital advertising, which, as you say, was the bread and butter. One of the challenges for publishers has been the growth of programmatic trading of advertising, and consequently, publisher yields have been hit. What can publishers do about that?
Well, it's interesting you say that, Ciar, and I'd say that that was the experience in the early days. It's certainly not the experience now. And we are in a fortunate position in that we have brands that have scale. But by investing in our programmatic capabilities, by investing in our first party data, by being able to present highly targeted audiences to advertisers, even through programmatic exchanges, we've started to see significant increases in yield. So pre-pandemic, yields had actually returned for standard inventory to the levels that we'd seen direct display being sold at many years ago. There was certainly a dip through the pandemic as the market took a bit of a shock, but they're now returning back to where they were. So I think that if you have the right programmatic setup, you present the right your audiences in the right way to advertisers. Programmatic actually doesn't have to be an inhibitor to being able to command good prices.
And what about ad blockers? Are they still posing a challenge?
Not really. I mean, we saw a very rapid increase for a period a number of years back. That leveled off and actually has even started to decline again now. So it's never become the existential threat that we thought it could be. I mean, I think it's still an issue, but it's not a material one that has held back our digital business in any way.
So do you think that consumers have just become a lot more comfortable with the way in which they're being targeted online?
I think that's right. Well, I think that consumers have got used to the fact that there is advertising. There is still a small cohort who will block, and it's very, very difficult, but they're not large enough to start to have to re-engineer your digital business to work around them, which is something that we did try for a short while. It was a game of cat and mouse, and really it was a zero-sum game, but it's leveled right off now. I think it's also down to all publishers to do their level best to ensure their user experiences are good. And we all know there are certain websites that we may visit where the user experience is terrible, and that's really disappointing because it is those small number of very bad user experiences that typically force people to turn on ad blockers. I mean,
Yeah.
I do one of the things that I do in my spare time is to go out and speak to schools occasionally as part of the Robert Peston Speakers for Schools program. And it's really interesting when you go into schools. It's if you ask kids why they're turning on ad blockers, because it is younger people typically. They will cite those small number of sites where the user experience is terrible. There's lots of interruptions, maybe autoplay videos, and so I think as publishers we need to take that on board and make sure that we get the balance right between and the value exchange right between providing great content, solving the problems that the user has come to you to find answers to in a frictionless way, and getting the balance right between the ability to commercialize that as well if you're providing that content for free.
And I mean, can you dig a bit deeper with that? What does a positive user experience look like? And from the commercial point of view, how do you strengthen those relationships with your consumers?
I come back to what I said a few moments ago, I think, which is are you solving, many consumers are coming to you for a specific reason, be that by search or be that through a direct relationship that you have with them. And are they coming for a recipe? Are they coming to find out what's on TV tonight? Are they coming to find out how to prune a shrub in a certain way? And I think as long as you stay true to your part of the promise, which is to deliver on deliver the content they're looking for in a frictionless manner, then it's fine to have some commercial messages around that, and indeed, very often is incredibly valuable. So, you mentioned right at the top of this interview here the Imagine Content Studio. That's been a real success story for us in recent years. Um,
Can you tell
that's
us a bit more about that? Yes.
exactly, yeah,
How's
yeah.
that working?
So that is where we are creating bespoke content on behalf of clients using our in-house editorial expertise. We understand the consumers and the markets better than um, certainly than most brands. Uh, we have a deep relationship with them, and we're able to create content that is both commercial, i.e., fulfilling a commercial objective, but done in a way that the consumer trusts. And the levels of engagement and high levels of response we get to that kind of highly integrated commercial program um, speaks volumes to how if you get the balance right, you can create a real win-win in terms of the consumer and commercial partners.
Can you think of any specific examples of where that's worked well with one or two of your brands?
So, well, we do it. I could think of many. One that I would call out over the last 12 months could be a major partnership we've done that's promoted across our entire portfolio with Winalot, where we've created a standalone brand called Great British Dogs, and that's promoted throughout our audience. The uptake has been great on that. The consumer engagement with being able to share pictures of dogs and stories of dogs um, has led to them renewing the partnership for a further 12 months. And it's been a real win-win because it's given our consumers and readers a platform to share the things that they love, particularly during these gloomy times, but at the same time has really delivered for the commercial partner. We have many examples in other spaces. So we do a lot of this kind of activity in the food space. In fact, we've got a great one just launched this week with Neff, which you can see some great recipes cooked in fantastic kit, and just that level of integration really creates a halo effect both for the brand who are working with you, but for us as well, because it allows us to create content that we wouldn't otherwise be able to provide our consumers with. So it's a real win-win.
You mentioned the effect of the pandemic, which is difficult to avoid, and yet you say that actually you have managed to ride that reasonably well, partly from the good fortune of having brands that are in the right space. What long-term impact do you think COVID will have on Immediate?
Um, so I think the first is clearly it has been relatively clear to see, and it's not just Immediate, it's across all magazine publishers, which is those brands that were more marginal have been placed under even greater pressure. And I'm thinking about particularly smaller print titles. Clearly when in the first lockdown, when some of the retail outlets were not open, brands that were relatively marginal have suffered, and we have undoubtedly seen a shift in consumer behaviour in terms of print into digital channels to a degree, and actually what we're seeing on some of our bigger websites is some of those habits are sticking. We've
Right.
seen which augurs well for the long term, but we've also seen a shift to a much higher percentage of subscribers across some of our brands when they wanted to receive that content on a regular basis, and there was uncertainty about the retail channel. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the last thing that we've seen, which has been really positive, has been the the um, the level of innovation. So as they say that cheesy phrase that necessity is the mother of all invention, and that's certainly been true in our experience through this time. And those muscles that we've developed and those new initiatives that we've launched, they will stay. And I think it's fostered a new culture of entrepreneurialism, not just at Immediate, but across the sector. You've seen some people do some really interesting things in terms of navigating through some very, very difficult times.
And you mentioned webinars. I mean, those have been a great thing during the pandemic, haven't they? Do you think that those will continue to be an important thing for you going forwards?
Absolutely. I mean, we've had great success, as I mentioned. We've sold best part of 10,000 tickets since we started those programs. We developed a six-figure revenue stream, and actually, the feedback we've had from the consumers who've attended those webinars has been incredibly positive. And so they will become a regular feature of those brands because they allow us to deliver highly um, or really deep content. So a great example was a sourdough workshop on BBC Good Food with um, one of the editors there showing people how to make great sourdough, which is not a trivial thing. And so again, you come back to that point, which is, are you providing great content? If you can provide great content that consumers value, they will be prepared to pay for it.
And sourdough was very much the foodstuff of the pandemic, wasn't it?
It was indeed.
Yes, yes. So looking ahead and at the wider consumer magazine market, what will be the things, in your opinion, that differentiate the winners from the losers?
Well, I think it comes back down to this point of having a diverse way in which you can um, have commercial relationships with your audiences, and those that will succeed are those that have different ways and a diverse range of um, opportunities for or commercial opportunities um, around those relationships. And so that can be newsstand still, albeit it'll be less important probably in the future than it is now. It is around subscriptions. It is around increasingly digital, and as I mentioned, increasingly that people who can find out ways that you can have direct relationships with your consumers and direct transactions with consumers. And this has been a journey, right? And everyone's been talking about it for a long period, but actually you can see now within all the larger magazine groups, is those who are succeeding are those who've got diverse ways um, to unlock value from the relationships they have with their consumers. So others are doing great work in different areas. Future really doubling down on affiliate, Hearst doubling down on brand licensing. I find it really encouraging that the publishers are getting back onto the front foot across the industry, as opposed to this period where there was a sense that publishers were under pressure, despite the fact that they were throughout the period growing their audiences, but just in different channels.
Immediate is a member of the PPA, the Professional Publishers Association, and the AOP, the Association of Online Publishers. And you have worked on industry bodies over the years. Collectively, as an industry, what should we be doing to encourage best practice?
Good question. I mean, I would really simplify that actually, and I would think there's a really simple phrase, which is I think we should be working together.
Right.
And that is, if you go back back 10, 20 years ago, publishers were fiercely independent. They were fiercely competitive. It was in our DNA. But the world has moved on, and the proliferation of media in recent years has meant that our competitors are no longer other publishers. They're other media channels, and be that the competition for eyeballs, be that the competition for advertising, whatever it might be. Um, we are actually much more aligned than we were in days gone by, and I think that by working together clearly in a way that doesn't breach any competition regulations, but working together and coming together for the common good, is what we need to do as an industry. So that be that around digital advertising, be that around the challenges we're facing and pressures from retail on the newsstand. There are so many ways in which we can share best practice, share knowledge, and work together to support the industry as a whole.
Great answer. What excites you most about the future of publishing?
I think it's this diversity in the way it changes. I mean, you never stand still, do you? And it's an industry that has transformed. If I think back to my early days in publishing with a little card deck and a telephone, um, the banging out calls to sell box classified ads, to where we are today, we are just such a different environment. Our brands have diversified in ways that we would never have thought possible. I think that is what is so exciting, is the fact that the pace of change is so fast now that you just don't know what's around the corner. But actually, what we're proving and what we have proven in recent years is that there is plenty of opportunity out there. It's just more complex and harder to find. And that makes it a lot more fun, right? Because you've got more things to or much more challenges, but actually much more opportunity than we ever had. I think, for example, the narrative that the magazine industry allowed to develop over readership, I think, has been a real shame. We allowed, as it was their media week, just to publish every 6 months doom and gloom stories around ABCs, whilst never talking about the growth in our digital audiences and the fact that our brand reach was bigger than ever before. And I think people are now beginning to embrace that. But actually, we've got so many more opportunities now, be that through reach on our digital platforms, be that through different ways that we interact with our consumers, be that we do face-to-face now, albeit not at the moment, but in the times when we can. We do so much more, and that's why it's so exciting, because it feels now that we have opportunity ahead rather than being in some declining sector that it may have felt like in the past.
Finally, a question we ask all of our guests. Outside of work, what do you do to relax?
Well, I'm not sure I'd start by saying, so a couple of things, but I'll start with the one that isn't really relaxation, which, for those who know me, know that I'm a very long-suffering Arsenal season ticket holder. Obviously don't get to go to the stadium these days, and it feels like it's been a long time since we've had any success, hence it's not very relaxing. And then beyond that, I do quite a lot of cycling. I'm a keen, if not the most svelte cyclist. So I love doing that as well, and I've got a young family, and that clearly takes up an awful lot of time as well.
Brilliant. Well, Duncan Tickell, thank you very much for being our guest on the In Publishing podcast.
Thank you very much, Kit. It's been a pleasure.
A big thank you again to Acorn Web Offset for sponsoring this podcast. If you're looking for a new magazine printer, then check out their website at acornweb.co.uk or contact Matt Carey on 07714 299 105 or by email at matthew.carey@acornweb.co.uk. Thanks, Duncan, for being our guest this week and inspiring us to go and make sourdough. You can find out more about Immediate Media at immediate.co.uk. Do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, and check out the podcasts page at inpublishing.co.uk to catch up on previous episodes. Thank you for listening, and please join me next week on the In Publishing podcast.